Hello, everybody. Welcome to Mark and Pat's Real Estate Power Hour for this week. We work in the Southern California real estate market, and we decided to funnel a solid hour every week for higher education. I've been in the market in Southern California for 30 years. Mark is going to be a new recruit into the business, and so he's getting licensed presently and taking all of the necessary classes to complete that. So we decided it'd be a good idea to work in a mentorship arrangement, and that's what we're doing. So Mark's been studying hard for the last week and sent over some questions to me. We're going to address those, and hopefully they'll also be helpful to you, the GP, which I refer to as the general public. So how you doing, Mark?
I'm good, man. It's good to see you, Pat. I love these times that we have to do this. It's always so informative and so inspiring. So, anyways, today we're going to continue on, everybody, with the chapters 33 through 37 in the Real Estate Principles book, the California Real Estate Principles book. So, the typical protocol for these sessions is I'll ask questions that I think are pertinent, questions from the chapters, and Pat will give us his practical, experienced, perspective of all of these things. Okay, so thank you guys for being with us and joining us. So we're going to start off this chapter. It's called Fee versus Leasehold. Fee versus Leasehold. And the first question is, what is a fee estate?
Fee estate. Yeah, it's interesting. Fee ownership is the highest form of ownership, just so you know, right? They refer to it as fee simple. Obviously, it comes from English common law, likely. It's just basically the highest form of ownership you can have on an estate. There may be some other underlying easements potentially on there, right? You may own the entire land, but there may be an easement on there. There could still be some restrictions to the fee simple ownership, like a utility easement, a water easement, or something else on the land. That happens quite often. But fee simple is the ultimate ownership interest versus lease interest, right? Leasehold interest would be different versus fee simple. There's a lot of condos, for example, and I've even seen some single family residences which are subject to leasehold land. You can buy the house for $1 million, but it's sitting on leased land. There's actually a lot of property down in Newport Beach that was originally Irvine Company land that's still leased land down there. There's some property over on the peninsula that looks like a good value, but it's on leased land subject to a lease for the next 60, 70 years. They're making a killing on it. So anyway, but fee simple is the ultimate highest form of ownership that you can have on land.
Okay, great. Well, that brings us to the next question. You kind of mentioned this a little bit. What is a leasehold estate?
Leasehold estate. That's a world I live in the retail world. I have a lot of investor clients. Mm-hmm. So a lot of those folks have, 2 properties, 3 properties, 1, some 7, 8. And I usually handle the leasing on those properties for them. I just closed a deal with somebody, and we're leasing that property now to a leaseholder who will have a leasehold estate, which is basically, it's a temporary right to hold the land or that property. Okay. Usually in California, most leases are for 1 year. At the end of a year, they then go month to month unless you sign another fixed term lease, a leasehold interest, again for another fixed term. But a leasehold interest is a temporary right to use that land, okay? For a fixed certain amount of time. Usually in California, it's a year. Commercial leases can be 3 years, 5 years, but on residential, it's usually 1 year. And after that, they can sign again for another year, or then it becomes month to month.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, so I'm not sure if this next question has to do with what you were previously alluding to, where someone owns the land and you can buy the house, but you can explain it to me. So this next was, can you explain a ground lease?
A ground lease, yeah. Typically, a ground lease you would see far more often in a commercial setting or an industrial setting.
Okay.
Meaning you control the land and you could control a key parcel of land, right? And I'll give an example as McDonald's, the hamburger chain guy, Ray Kroc. This is what he would do all the time. He would identify key parcels of land and say to landowners, look, I have this unbelievable franchise. It's called McDonald's. We make hamburgers. We do this, this, and this. We have a quadrillion sold. We want to put one of my bulletproof franchises on your land. I'll pay you. I don't want to buy your land, but I just want to, I'll pay you $5,000, $10,000, $20,000 a month. He may be making $1 million a month. Who knows? But he'll pay them a certain amount of money to put one of his buildings on their land. That would be a ground lease.
Okay.
Because he would control that. He would control the building and the maintenance of the land and everything. Or that could be negotiated also. Maybe the landowner would control, maintenance of the land. This is real estate, and anything is up for, negotiation. But that's the best indication or example of a ground lease right there, McDonald's. He did it for years successfully, just controlling other people's land and not having to buy the land and incurring additional property tax and all the rest of it. But he just ran his successful franchise on it at a fraction of the cost.
Okay, no, that's a good example. So when you were saying earlier, Pat, that you could have a deal where, like you were talking about the people in Irvine who own the property, own the land, but don't own the property on the land. How does that work for the property owner as far as advantages for them? How is that advantageous for them? Because if they want to sell the property later or sell the house later, I mean, obviously they have to contend with the landowner, right? So how does that work as far as advantages for both sides of the coin?
Typically the land is key land. Right? Key locations, like the land I just told you, Newport, right? What's inherent down there? What's intrinsic? The ocean. It's very close to the ocean. People see the benefit of buying a property, even though it has a lease on it, because it's within a half a mile, 1 mile of the beach or some very specific location. That's this land that's like this typically is key located property that an owner never wants to give up ownership of, that just sees the benefit of always keeping it and letting other people put their high value real estate on if they're willing to pay him for the lease. That's primarily my opinion on it. It's really key land that no one wants to let go of. They just want to continue to own it forever. And they'll sign a 50-year lease and pass it on to their heirs, or a 100-year lease or whatever. It's usually long-term lease property. At some point, usually you have to pay the piper. There's some key land in Dana Point, South Laguna type area that's like that. And the lease is coming up where they'll have to buy it out. Some people have bought it out in advance. If they let it run to the term, I think the buyout is like $1.5 million to $2 million to buy the land. Because I mean, this is on the south side of PCH, steps to the ocean. So at some point, they're not going to extend the leasehold on the land. They just want to buy out of it. And knowing that as you buy it, you got to factor that in.
Wow. So that could come back. That's kind of like a crazy balloon payment that could come up on you, right?
Right. Yeah. That will be coming up on you.
Okay. All right. Next question. What is a tenancy at will?
Tenancy at will is kind of self-explanatory. It's like it's basically like the leasehold that we talk about is subject to the statute of frauds, which means has to be in writing, right? The tenancy at will does not have to be in writing. It's just basically an agreement between a landlord and a tenant, or two people, basically creating a verbal agreement, just saying, we're going to create a tenancy. You can come and stay at my house for a certain amount of time. And we're just going to create a verbal agreement. You pay me some money, we'll create a verbal agreement. There's not going to be any specific rights or things that are incumbent upon you or me. It's just an agreement. It's kind of like a gentleman's agreement. We shake hands on it.
Huh. I'm sorry. It brought something humorous to my thinking about how much money is in Newport and all the gigs that I played in Newport, seeing all these rich guys with these rich older guys with these younger girls. I'm thinking that's kind of St. Will situation going on right there, isn't it?
Yeah, that's exactly what that is, man.
Whatever,
See,
whatever I can remember this, Pat, whatever way I can remember, you know what I mean?
Yeah, man, well, everything's a deal, Mark. I mean, everything is a business deal, right? I mean, that's the way I look at that situation. That's a business deal.
Yeah.
They definitely have a tenancy going at will. That's not in writing, and and that's what that's about, man.
Yeah, that's okay. Well, that's good. Good. Thank you, Pat. That's yes, your expertise service is
Yes.
for us to have. All right, so let's move on to this next chapter here. The next chapter, chapter 34, the heading of the chapter is the tenancies in real estate. So, what is an unlawful detainer or UD?
Right. Very yes, and you'll have to know this if you work in the leasing world. That's basically just it's a court proceeding. It's it's basically when you start an eviction on a tenant that is breaching the lease in some way, not paying, having parties until 2 in the morning, and you have to file a 3-day notice for them to quit that, or they're subject to being evicted through an unlawful detainer. It's just the court proceedings for evicting somebody.
Okay, so makes sense. Okay, next question. What is a holdover tenant?
Holdover tenant, again, kind of self-explanatory if you think of the word holdover. It's just someone staying beyond the term of that lease, right? Typically, if you have how leases work, typically, this is not how all of them work, but this is how legally they work. If you sign a 1-year lease from January 1 to December 30 of that year, the lease is a fixed term. You're setting a precedent in advance, stating to the tenant, I'm going to give you a 1-year lease from January through the end of December. My precedent in my mind is come January 1, you're out of the property because that's what the lease says. It's for 1 year. But this is how things work in the real world. The real world is, and I tell all my inbound tenants and my landlords for that matter, 60 days before that lease is up, I want you to formally notice your landlord or formally notice your tenant. What are your intentions come December 30th? Do you intend to stay, or do you intend to leave per the lease, which states you're going to be out, the end of the year? And usually the conversation goes, no, we want to stay, and that starts another conversation. Okay, well, would you like to sign another year lease? If you do, if I can count on you staying for another year, I'll keep your rent the same. Or if you don't, I'm not going to sign another. Yes, I want to stay, Mr. Landlord, but I'm not going to sign a year lease. I'll keep you month to month. The landlord may want to do a customary bump in their rent amount because he knows that tenant can just give him a 30-day notice at any time during the next year and be out of there, right? And the landlord has to give him a 60-day notice if he doesn't like it to get him out. So, you have to weigh the positives and, and the cons on those things, on how they work. But basically, the holdover tenant would just be somebody that held over without any sort of verbal, any sort of written agreement. And then you would have to, go through a UD, an unlawful detainer, or some proceedings to figure out what's going on.
Okay, well, with things being currently the way that they are in the world and them having, this stay on evictions and things like that, would there be seemingly like more holdover tenants happening in society right now because you can't evict people?
100%. Yeah, I would say so. Not in any of my properties that I have that I keep an eye on. None of my landlords have told me that's going on, but I have seen notes all over the MLS, the multiple listing service that you and I will pay attention to as agents, where properties are listed at. I've seen specific notes specifically on investment properties, duplexes, triplexes, where they net out the rents. They have to net out the monthly rents and then the pro forma rents, which are the projected rents in the future. And it will state right there, one tenant is paying, the other tenant is not paying per COVID. So yeah, there are those examples happening right now. I mean, that's part of the moving target in the real estate world. It's continually changing. And the moving dynamics are the people dynamic. People are losing their jobs, getting better jobs, having to reload. Different things are happening. So yes, but to answer your question, it's happening.
Okay. Um, yeah, that brings, you know, it's funny. It brings to mind a question I was going to ask you. You've been in this business for a long time. This is a little off topic from what we're going on to, but I'm curious about this. Um, the evolution of the real estate market, with everything being so, you know, with us being able to be so much better at showing properties online via, you know, 3D versions and all of these amazing kind of pictures we can take now, like, you know, whether they're drone pictures and different things like that going on. Um, the evolution of the market. I heard somebody's talk about this recently, where that there are some people projecting that eventually, you know, the real estate agent will become more of a glorified transaction coordinator than they will someone who goes out and actually takes people places. Because in this time, since we're not able to, you know, be sociable in the way that we usually would be, you know, people are doing houses in a whole different way from being, you know, seeing things online in a more, you know, extravagant way. So whether they're really high quality videos or high quality, you know, pictures and that, all of that going on, how affecting do you see that for the potential of the future of real estate, as far as real estate agents actually being people who are actually out there, you know, elbow greasing with the public, going, okay, let's work your deal out, because so much of this can be done online now, and that's also being proven because of what we're going through now, right? I mean, you are a different example of that, because I seem to find that you are definitely a person who's hands-on. You're out there in the field. You're with your clients, and you're in the dirt with them, so to speak, right? But
Hmm.
your professional opinion, do you see the evolution of this going to where there's a lot more of what you do online instead of in person?
No,
Okay. Do
not because, and I'll tell you why.
uh,
Two things. I like to, uh, you said like a glorified, what did you say? Glorified
coordinate.
contract coordinator. I call myself a glorified taxi driver sometimes. But because I'm so proficient at driving everywhere and getting around town and doing it the most efficient way, I feel like I'm a London cabbie. I'm like I know my way around town.
He's real estate Uber.
Real estate Uber. I kind of feel like that's part of my job, and to be a good driver and like that. So it's kind of funny. But here's the deal. The component that will never be removed from this is the human component, Mark. Uh, you know, I've been in this business 30 years, not always on the sales side. I've been on the sales side for the last 20 years, right?
Hmm.
And that in the last 20 years, the MLS part of it, the sales side of it, has changed so much. You know, it changed dramatically in the first 5 years. Then it changed again the next 5 years, and it changed in the next 5 years. It's all online now. But the thing is this: I know some of these online agents, and they're absolute hacks. They don't know people. They don't know property. They don't know their marketplace. They don't know the nuance of anything. They don't know how to maneuver people. They don't know how to be professionals. You know, and who are we selling houses to? People. We're in a people business. We need to understand our clients. We need to understand what they're looking for. We need to listen to them, to pay attention, so that we can send them properties they're specifically looking for. Just today, I keep very tight property files. One of my clients, I put her into a lease 2 years ago. She was coming from Florida, sight unseen. She met me at a hotel. I picked her up at a hotel. She was a nervous wreck when I picked her up. I picked her up right on time when I said it was. I assuaged all of her fears. I made her so calm. She said, Patrick, one of my biggest fears is I'm just a very anxious person. I'm a business person, but you make me feel so comfortable. You know everything about this market, and you're just so easy to get along with, and this and that. And I'm thinking to myself, man, you don't know me. and but 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 when it comes to real estate, she was right. I did know everything, and I do know my marketplace, and I do take it very personal and in a professional way. And I keep very drilled down notes, and she's very difficult, and because she's anxious. So she sent me a note back on the 3rd of September stating, I need this sort of property. I need this very unique property and very remote and this and that. And I was thinking to myself, she's absolutely dreaming. She doesn't understand how real estate works, right? But I keep everything in the files, and I keep all their notes because I want to remind them what they tell me. And I found the perfect property for her today. And I sent it to her, and I just highlighted her note and put it in parentheses. Boom. This is what you told me back on September 3rd. Bam, there's the property. Look at how remote it is. Look at the location of it. Look at where it is. And she sent me the first line in it. And her email was, "Man, you're so good, Patrick." I'm like, "Man, you make me good. You gave me the information. I will not let you forget the information you gave me. Unless you're an absolute liar, then I'm going to keep the information. I'm going to hold you to what you tell me.
Right.
And if you're being honest with me, what you're looking for, I'll find it because I'm a professional, and
Yeah.
I will not stop until I find that property because I intend to find it for you. I have a job to do."
Yeah. Well, yeah. So it's interesting. Like I said, I've researched for things online so much, like a piece of gear, no matter what it is that I'm looking for, right? And look at all the different kind of reviews that I can look at, and before you know it, after a while, depending upon what it is I'm looking for, I can get a little bleary-eyed with all of the online information, and it all seems to kind of like blur together into this amalgam of like confusion sometimes or frustration, and it's nothing like when I go to the store and I walk into Best Buy and I pick up that thing and I go, oh, that's what it feels like. That's what it looks like. That's what I can. Now, all those reviews either make sense or don't make sense, and all the stuff that I've learned about this, and yeah, I can see it now. So I think you're right. There's only so much information you can glean from online, that online presence. You get that stuff and it's great and it helps you to make a better decision. But there's nothing like being in person with the thing that says this. And like you said, but then you lean into a whole nother perspective of it where it's the sense of personality. Who's going to calm you down when you're freaking out about this information online? If you actually have to do a whole transaction completely online, I would be I would be a lot more, cautious because there's so many things that someone says online and you're like, well, that's not really the truth. That's kind of bending it to your perspective, and then when you get in person with someone, there's nothing like that personal contact because, like you said, you could sense this woman's sense of anxiety for things, and you know how to contend with that as a human being. You know how to calm her down, give her a place of balance and peace to move forward with whatever you guys have to move forward with, and I think that's so important. But like the millennial generation, man, they do so much online, so much, and I know, I mean, my son's kind of like this, where he's not, I don't really like people so much. They're kind of weird to be around sometimes. So he's sometimes inclined to do things online in a way that I think maybe millennials, that's kind of the philosophy. You know what? I don't need a human being to be interacted here. I need to look at something and here's a contract that says this and this and this. But, I don't know, man. There's so much. Maybe I hope it's not an old school idea that people still matter. You know what I mean? Like you and I, a generation where we spent so much. We played outside when we were kids. It wasn't like video games were a possibility. That was something that I never ever even dreamed of. I wanted to go out and climb trees and play football in the field and do stuff like that. Now it's all done online. So it's an interesting thing. I thought it was an interesting thing to kind of bring up in our conversation because we are living in a time that's even more so put online because of what's happening with the world nowadays with the epidemic and stuff. So
Yep.
so much being done online. So I really wanted to get your perspective. But like I said, I know from us talking every week, you're a hands-on guy. You're out there, and obviously it shows. I mean, you've been in it for a long time, and you just did 5 deals in the course of 14 days or so. That's an amazing accomplishment. So when I talk to my other real estate friends and I tell them about you, they're like, "Who is this guy, Pat? How can I talk?" Right away, you can go online, watch our conversations online.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. I've heard this forever and ever and ever and ever and ever. And you know how much I'm invested to lifetime learning. Like I told you, my morning routine. I read every single morning, every day, every night, right? I keep journals. I have different names for my notes that I take on my books and different things, right? And I'm learning, reading, connecting, constantly learning. And I've seen all of these trends and I've seen these things, but what people don't understand completely about as much stuff that's going online is they're not buying a pair of shoes. They're not buying toothpaste at the best price from Amazon. They're not doing these things. Real estate is a touchy-feely business. These real estate agents take photos very, and they make a place look like the Taj Mahal, and it's the size of a postage stamp. And I tell people all the time when I take them to properties, the reason you have to go touch stuff, I'm touching 30 plus houses a week, just knowing my marketplace, me with no one in my car. I'm looking at hundreds on my computer. But when I see stuff that I need to see, I go touch it, man, because I looked at a key property, a duplex like this last week for a very sophisticated commercial guy that wants me to be his agent. And he's an agent himself, but he wants me to be his agent. And and I had to look at this property to say, what am I missing on this property? I went and looked at it and I found some key features about it that I couldn't see unless I was there. And so when you go and touch stuff, you really feel it. And that's why I get people there and say, look, and they go, I don't like this property, don't like that one. And I go, that's perfectly fine. It's so important that we find the properties we don't like so we can get to the ones we do like quicker. But we won't know that unless we go out touching stuff together. And the other thing I know about people too, no matter what they tell me online, it's not the same thing as when I get them in person. There's nuance that they're holding back. There's emotion that they're holding back. They don't even know it yet. But when they get to property, they feel different things. And that's the only way you know it, is when you go out and take them and look at them in property and you said, yeah, but you told me this online. And I remind them of that, like that story I reminded you about of this person that said something to me in an email, and I pushed her back her own comment and said, found what you're looking for, here it is, boom. Okay, now it's up to you to tell me, no, the property's wrong or it's right, right?
Right.
But you won't know that unless you start touching properties with people and they see your reaction to their reaction. They say, oh, I like this. And you say, oh, I see. You like that in this house, but you kind of didn't like it in the other one. Oh, yeah, but it's different in this one. See, because of that, and go, oh, okay. And then you can say, yeah, yeah, yeah. So when I go out and see 5 other properties by myself and I see something just like that, I'm going to call you and you're going to come out that night after work and because I found it. That's how good you have to be, man. Yeah, that's how much attention you have to pay.
Yeah, no, like I said, as always, you're inspiring in your knowledge of this, Pat, and it's like your experience just speaks volumes to me. Every time I
Cool.
feel like you give me a new thing of like, man, I got to remember that, you know, because it's like, anyways, I just appreciate it. So let's go
Cool.
on to the next question. So the next question is, what are the differences between a lease agreement and a rental agreement?
Lease agreement and rental agreement. Yeah, big difference. Lease agreement, basically what I told you a moment ago, is for a fixed term, right? I'm
Right.
going to sign a 1-year lease with you. A rental agreement is typically a 30-day agreement, right? A lease agreement, you can break it, but it's going to cost you, right? A month-to-month agreement, you got 30 days, you're in or out every 30 days. You can change it. You can adjust it every 30 days. You can change it. A lease agreement is for a fixed term for a fixed amount of money. You can't 3 months into a lease agreement say, I'm going to jack up the rent $200. No. You signed a contract, said, I'm going to pay $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 a month, whatever, for this next year. At the end of the year, you can adjust it, or I can leave. On a rental agreement, completely different. It's flowing like a river, man. If it rains, the river rises,
Yeah.
and that's what a rental agreement is like. It can change every 30 days.
Okay. Okay. All right, cool. Let's move on to the next chapter here. The next chapter is called Tenant Leasehold Improvements.
Mm.
Can you describe a notice of non-responsibility?
Yeah, I don't see this much. I see the opposite kind of this. Notice or non-responsibility is what a homeowner would file against the property. So a vendor couldn't file a construction lien or a mechanics lien against the property. And I haven't been in, this is a real estate book question. Not, it happens in the real world, but of course, but it's not something I've seen against a property. As a matter of fact, when I saw the question, I'm like, I'm going to look into that a little bit. I want to know a little bit more about it. What would be involved for a homeowner that could file such a thing to try and get around someone filing a mechanics lien on their own property? And I'm sure the mechanics lien question is going to come up in a minute, but based on your chapter, but yeah, so, but that's basically what it is. It's a legal document that a homeowner would file against a property so a lien couldn't get put on there, uh, which would not enable him to sell the property without remedying that lien.
Okay, that makes sense.
So that's definitely a question, you know, for your real estate exam. that is not going to come up a lot in the real estate world, even though it's a real world thing. But as a matter of fact, in my ever-going education, that's something I'm just going to drill down on to see how that's going to work and how that would be permissible in the real world. I'm always interested. See, when you become a real estate agent, you have access to 12 or 13 different attorneys for the California Association of Realtors. I can pose questions to them legally anytime I feel like it, and they get back to me within 24 hours.
Okay.
So, but I'm sure I can research that also.
All right, cool. I think you put it well, but I'm sure there's stuff we can expand on for that. But as you get more information, we can bring that up in future videos. Okay, the next question from that chapter is, what is permissive improvement?
Permissive improvements. Basically, if it would be in the leasing world, like we're talking about, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So somebody, I'll give you a real world example. I'm a commercial tenant. I've got an old building on a property in a great location. Someone comes in and says, I want to lease this property, but my intent is to demolish your building, and I want to put up my own building, and I just want you to know I intend to do that. And the landlord would go, great, because you're putting it on my building. If you leave it there, it's going to be mine. And that person who's putting it up there would see the benefit of doing that per like what I told you a moment ago about the McDonald's story, how he used to capture key land and put his building up there. They're not going to demolish the McDonald's when they leave. They're going to leave it there, right?
Right.
They've improved it, and maybe they'll put a different building in there, a different business. So that's what it would be. It would enable somebody to demolish the current building that's there, put up their own without letting the landlord know that's the specifics of what they're going to do.
Right. Okay. I'm sorry, man, but today must be my funny analogies running through my head as you're telling me the information. Because did you ever Coming to America with Eddie Murphy and Arsenio Hall and all?
Yeah. Yeah.
Remember the guy had a McDowell's and it wasn't McDonald's. He had that land and then he built McDowell's instead of McDonald's out of that, and it was
They were suing him, right?
exactly.
Yes.
All right. So anyway, sorry, I digress, but I have to. I don't know. It's a funny day for me today. Okay, so that's permissive improvement is you're allowed to change the property, but you got to know that once you leave the property, the owner gets that.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. Next question is what is revision as it pertains to real estate fixtures?
Revision as it pertains to real estate fixtures. That one, I'm going to have to defer to what how your book is presenting that in what context, because fixtures in a leasing situation typically would be, right, so somebody's coming to lease a building, there is a counter in the front, there are shelves within there, there's a pony, whatever it is, right? Those things would be considered fixtures, right?
Right.
Or trade fixtures, right? And they become permanent or pertinent, so to speak, once you adhere them permanently to the structure. So how are they posing that question in your book? Are you able to read that real quick?
Well, here's the definition they give. It's pretty much almost what we just talked about, but a little different. Reversion is the conveyance of real estate fixtures from a tenant to a landlord on expiration of a lease. So it sounds to me like whatever fixtures you have, they're going to go to the owner when your lease expires, and that is called reversion. Does that make sense?
Got it. They revert to the owner of the building versus the tenant who put them in place taking them out.
Right. Right.
Interesting. Yeah, that makes sense. There's different words that are used in real estate that are similar to that. So it's interesting how they're using that as it pertains to leasehold interest. Got it.
Okay. Okay. And now the last question here in this chapter is you alluded to this earlier again too. What is a mechanic's lien?
Yes, the mechanic's lien, which is also known, just so you know, as a construction lien.
Okay.
Typically, because a person offering labor and or materials to alter the property, right? To do an upgrade, to change it. I actually have that going on right now on a property. I had put somebody into a lease. The agent said, Patrick, would you get your maintenance person to come fix the property and do those things? My maintenance person won't be able to do it. The owner is out of area. He can't do it. I said, sure, let me call my guy. Well, they haven't paid my vendor who went out there to do the work. And it's not a lot of money. It's only $200+. But it's a principal thing for him. He's like, I mean, they're just totally sticking it to me. They're not going to pay me. So I paid him, right? But he said, I'm still going to stick them with the mechanics lien on their property. And if they pay me, I'll give you back your money, Patrick, because I don't expect you to pay me. But I said, I need you. You're a reliable vendor. You do things for me constantly. It's just the cost of doing business. It's a cost of doing business. You win some, lose some. But he's going to put a lien, which is called a mechanics lien, on their property for the goods and services that he provided that they asked him to do. And he has legal capacity to do that because he provided work for them and they are now not paying him. Yeah. So he can do that. And what that does is if he were to go to try and sell that property, he would have to remedy that lien before he could transfer free and clear title to a new buyer. And remedy would be either have that lien removed legally somehow if someone did it fraudulently, or he would have to pay that lien to offer free and clear title to the new owner, because otherwise they would be taking the property with the lien on there.
Right. No, I mean, that makes good sense, and I'm glad. It's funny how you always have a timely story to something that we're going through here.
Yeah.
Another question that has to do with what you just explained. When a mechanics lien is placed upon a title, does the title owner, are they made aware of that, like at the time that it's happening, or is this something they won't ever notice until they want to, sell the house or do something with their title?
I don't believe, I'm not sure. I don't know definitively. They're going to find out 100% when they go to sell it, because you're going to pull a prelim title report and find out all the constructive notice. Remember, constructive notice in real estate is recorded notice, deeds, liens, security interests in a property, right? So it's called constructive notice, which is recorded notice. That's when you find out what's on a property. Now, whether the county recorder sends a homeowner a notice when a mechanics lien is filed, I don't know. But it would be interesting to find out. He's having a service that does this all the time, do this for him.
Right.
So I'm sure he'll find out about that process one way or another. I've already let them know, if you don't do this, this vendor is going to put a mechanics lien on the property. If they continue to just ignore it, I've put them on notice that that's what's going to happen.
Right. Well, okay, that's interesting, because I say that they decide they're not going to pay it and they're going to just ignore it, and then they want to sell the house in 5 years. I mean, at that point in time, the contractor who put the mechanics lien on the house, would he be due interest on the money that was owed, or any extra kind of remedies because of that?
I'm sure he could do a customary amount of interest, right? I had another, I sold a property like this earlier this year that had one of the taxing entities, IRS and Franchise Tax Board, right? It had one of those taxing entities on the property. The original lien had almost, it went up like $12,000 over the original amount, right? And that was because of interest and penalties, right, per the taxing entity. Mm-hmm. And it's, first of all, it's illegal in America to give anybody an interest-free loan. Most people don't know that.
Really?
If you claim a loan, on a tax return from somebody, and you just go, I gave someone a loan and they paid it back, the IRS can contest that and say, you should have charged that person a customary amount of interest, and if you didn't, we're gonna levy you that you got that amount of interest and tax you on the interest you should have gotten.
I never knew that. That's crazy. So you're not allowed to give a loan for 0%, huh? You'd have to.
Not according to the IRS definition on it. No, you can gift someone money. I can gift you a certain amount of money. There's gifting limits you can give money to, but that's a gift. There's no implied repayment. But if there's any repayment amount, you have to charge interest.
Wow, that's crazy. I didn't even realize that. That's interesting. That's good to know. Hmm. Okay. Moving on here. So the next chapter, chapter 36, is called Water Rights. So question number
Mm.
one is what is an overlying right?
Uh, Overlying right. Okay, that's basically when you get a property, you'll see when you get a deed to a property, you'll see all kinds of rights that you get to that property. You'll see mineral rights, right? Land rights, mineral rights. You'll also see water rights. That's what an overlying right is, right? It's overlying on the deed. Whatever's underneath the land, right? You have rights to that also, which would be the water rights to the property. So you don't only own what's on top of the land, you own what's below the land, and you own what's above you. So basically, if you have a rectangle of land, it goes down to the center of the earth per the deed restrictions that show on there. You own mineral rights and water rights 1,000 feet down, right?
Wow, okay.
Beyond that, maybe not. And you also own up as well. So above you, that's why people, you could prevent people from, flying drones over your house above a certain house, and you can shoot them down with a shotgun. Or because
Dude, I owe that air right there.
yeah, because they may be able to fly that drone, but if it flies over your house, you do have a legal right to shoot it down if it's over your house.
Wow, that's good to know too.
Yeah, man.
I'm learning all kinds of stuff today, Pat. Wow.
Yeah, there you go.
Good stuff. Okay, next one. What is a prescriptive right as it pertains to water rights?
Is it water rights or easement? Easement by prescription?
Well, this is just like, since we're in the chapter of water rights, they bring up something called a prescriptive right, and I just wanted to see your take on that.
Prescription right is,
Pres-
um,
Prescriptive.
yeah, yeah. It's a right you would have by using something for a certain amount of time. I relate it to easements, right? When I think about a prescriptive easement, it's, let's say there's two pieces of land, and I'm driving over this guy's land for 10 years to get to my house. That's a prescriptive easement. The guy's seen me driving over his land. He hasn't told me to get off his land. He said, yeah, you can use that. I can now petition to get a prescriptive easement because I've been using this thing, for 10 years. He's seen me in in an open setting and continuously. So he gives me the right to use that in a prescriptive way.
Okay, so this is very much related to easements then, right?
Very much so.
Okay, cool. All right, good. Next question. Are riparian rights considered appurtenant?
I would believe they are. Now, again, this is one of those book questions that doesn't come up all the time in my world, but as I understand appurtenant, it means goes with the property, right? It's appurtenant to the property. So riparian rights or water rights, right? If you have a lot of land and you have a river running by you, the amount of land that hits that river, the length of that land, you have the right to use that water in that amount, right? Whatever the deed says, you have riparian rights for 100 linear feet on that side of the property per the riparian rights because you abut that river, right? So
Right.
I would believe a riparian right would be appurtenant because it goes with that land. Unless your book tells me different, I would say 100% because it's a right with the land.
Yeah, from my understanding of the book, you're quoting it exactly how they. I mean, like, different terms, different words, but yeah, that's the meaning I get from it. So
Yes.
makes sense. Okay, next question. What is the State Water Resources Control Board's purpose?
Basically, they're the California Water Resource Board for drinking water, protection of the environment, public health and safety, and so forth, with regards to the water in the state of California.
Okay, that sounds pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah.
Moving on to the next chapter here, chapter 37. This chapter is titled Covenant Conditions and Restrictions, so CC&Rs. Okay, so covenants, conditions, and restrictions.
Right, CCNRs, like you said, mostly they're on condo associations, but not always. There are a lot of homeowners associations on single family residence also,
Okay.
right? Not only for condominiums, but basically they're just written rules, regulations, and restrictions with regards to what you can do around your property. Here's another real life situation. A lease, a property that I just closed. I noticed when I went put up above the door, one of those, those looks like a dome and it's black. Have you seen those cameras?
Yeah.
And I thought, that looks like a camera, but where's that hooked up to? And then my homeowner sent me got a letter from her homeowners association, said it was in violation of the CCNRs to install external cameras like that. And which makes perfect sense, right? Because as a condo ownership, you own airspace in a condo. You own walls in, not walls out, right?
Mm.
And so anything you place on the outside of the building, that would be in a violation of the CCNRs because they don't want the integrity of the building to be breached, changed, unless they give approval of it. And in their CCNRs, it says you cannot have external cameras. So, and I sent a text message to the prior owner and I said, hey, do you know anything about this camera? And he goes, it's fake. And I'm like, what do you mean it's fake? He said, it's just a fake thing I stuck up there like a security thing to try and dissuade people, right? And I'm like, oh my God, okay. So now I have to have a maintenance guy there come and nuke it, take it down and patch it somehow because he put this fake bloody camera up. in violation of the CCNRs.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So okay. Well, I get it. Like you said, these CCNRs typically are things that HOAs are gonna put onto properties when you're buying into condominium properties.
Right, and like you said, HOA stands for homeowners association. So usually when you have a homeowners association, you're also going to have CCNRs. They go together. Those two acronyms go like peas and carrots, right? HOA, CCNRs.
Okay.
They go together.
Makes sense. All right. Next question. What is an affirmative covenant?
An affirmative covenant. That would be something, a promise that someone has to do as it is related to a contract or a deed or a lease or something like that. I'll give you an
It's about CCRs, Pat. So maybe
on CCNRs. Okay, so I'll give you an example of something like that. It would be like the homeowners association must keep in place earthquake insurance.
okay.
You're paying X number of dollars for an HOA every month, and you get the CCNRs, which states per the HOA directive, they must keep necessary liability insurance or earthquake insurance on the building. They would have to do that for the entire term of the HOA being in place. And an example of that on the other side of it would be renter's insurance. If you said an inbound tenant had to maintain renter's insurance for a year and he decided you just cancel in 6 months, you could say, no, you signed a lease agreement with an affirmative covenant clause in there stating that you would keep renter's insurance in place. You've breached the lease. I have grounds to file a UD right now, unlawful detainer. The first step would be a 3-day notice to remedy it before you did that. But that's an example on both sides of the fence.
Okay, that makes sense. So something that has to be done that's in the covenants, conditions, and restrictions then, right?
Specific line item that says they must do this.
Okay, cool. The next one has to do with that. So the next one is, what is a negative covenant? I imagine it's probably something you shouldn't be doing.
Yes, it prevents certain activities, right?
Yeah.
It prevents, they cannot do certain things, right? There's certain things they can't do. I mean,
a fake camera on the outside of your condo.
right. I mean, and like we've talked about different things over the weeks when we've been doing this a lot, and we talked about discrimination, right? We talked about that. I mean, I would think that also a negative covenant, that would be one of the things They can't, they cannot be prejudiced on, on race, creed, or color, or different things like that. But specifically, if it's with regards to CCNRs and HOAs and things like that, it would be very specific to what their capacity is to do certain things and prevents them from doing certain things.
Okay, that makes sense. All right, Pat. Well, that brings us to the end of our chapters today. Thank you so much for everything you've said. I have some questions for you.
Yeah.
I was talking to my son because he's been interested now in wondering how it is to buy a house, what he might need to know about that. So when I was discussing with this, yeah, he has all that totally wired, like more than I expected. When he told me, I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize you're that good with things. Thank goodness I told you to get a credit card when you were 17 years old so that you could start building your credit. He still thinks I'm not the one who initiated that idea, but I know I did. But anyway,
Yes.
I digress. Sometimes they think they know more than you told them, you know. All right,
Yes.
I hope you, son, if you're watching this, I love you. I'm just only looking for the best for you. But anyways, my question is, let's see, what kind of ownership of title? He has a girl that he's with now that he is, they're in a serious relationship, but they're not married yet. But what kind of title ownership should they be looking at? I mean, from what I understand, community property, tenants in common, joint tenancy. There's another one I'm missing, but what would you advise as far as title ownership in that way that they should be looking at?
Yeah. Well, I had a conversation. I'll digress for a minute, and then I'll get specifically to your point. Somebody called me yesterday as a referral client. I helped someone buy a house this time last year. It was the United States Marine.
Mm-hmm.
And they referred another one of their colleagues to me, called me and said, Patrick, you're the person I want to help me buy my first VA house. My colleague told me, you're the person, you know everything about this, this, and this. And I said, I'm the person. And he told me some specifics about how he wanted to take title, right? And I said, well, look, we can carve the pie up a lot of different ways. You tell me what your specific situation is, and then I'll know which direction to lead you. So I would ask Max the same thing, that, look, how do you intend to buy the property? Are you going to put all the money in on the down payment? Are you going to be paying the monthly payment 100% yours? If so, you're buying this property 100% you. This is solely your property. You're not married, so it's not subject to community property law. You're going to take this property basically as a sole proprietor individual, as an unmarried man. That's how you're going to do it. If you later get married to her, you might want to quit claim the interest over to her, a half interest to her. But in the meantime, you're going to take it as an unmarried man, and then to ultimately protect your property, you're going to quit claim that ownership over to a trust. And then basically the trust is a bucket that's going to hold title to the property with you controlling title to the property. And that nothing's going to happen to you ever, son. But if something were to happen to you, the trust owns the property, and the trust has specific directives in there that states your intention, what was to take place to this property should something happen to you. So it just depends. The question's next.
What kind of title would that be called?
Well,
Would it be called? Would it be? I mean, like I said, there's the community properties, which you're saying this is not that. This is this?
he would take title as his name, and it would say the grant deed from the previous owner would grant title to John Doe, an unmarried man, as his sole and separate property.
Okay.
That's how he would take title.
It's a grant deed title then.
Right. The owner that's going to give him the property would grant him a grant deed stating, I grant the interest of said property to John Doe, an unmarried man, as his sole and separate property. That's how he takes title.
Okay.
If in fact they are buying this together, they take title as tenants in common or joint tenants. Tenants in common would say, I have a 50% interest, you have a 50% interest, right? And then they have what's referred to as an equal and undivided interest,
Okay.
right? Or they could take title as tenants in common, with me having 70% interest, you having 30% interest, because you're going to bring in 30% to the down payment, and every month you're going to contribute 30%. So why would you give them 50%? You would give them a tenancy in common. You would give them a joint tenancy with a specific interest noted that if you sell the property, I get 70% of the profit, you get 30%, because that's how much you've been bringing to the table every month.
Okay.
But until you know see, when I have questions that come up like this, it requires me to ask questions,
Right.
right? How much money are you bringing in? Are you putting any money down? Are you going to contribute to the monthly payment? What's going to happen? How's it going to work every month, right? Whereas this gentleman I spoke with yesterday told me the specifics of what he wanted. So I was able to tell him directly, okay, fine, I get it. This is how we're going to do it.
Okay. Well, let me ask you a question because it seems to me that those kind of things can change over time, obviously. So if this person were to get married, then they wanted to put something into community property, then that has different stipulations as to the way that the ownership works out between the two parties, right? But if you
Yeah.
do something like, say you, I guess my question is like, in those different situations, the different types of title ownership, when someone passes away, then things get to be a lot different, right? Like, if my understanding is correct, in community property, if someone passes away, the remaining property reverts to the other owner. Am I right in that? Okay,
Yes.
in joint tenancy or tenancy in common, those two different ones, that is a different, it works out differently that way. So say, can you explain that, be more detailed in, as far as tenants in common and joint tenancy, what happens in the event of someone passing away or dying that's a property owner?
Yeah. So there's very specifics. Like a lot of times when husbands and wives take property, like you said, they take title as community property with right of survivorship. Meaning, if one of them dies, the other one gets that interest because of the right of survivorship interest, right? In tenants in common, they own a specific amount of the property, right? Right? So they own 50%, 60%, 70%. So that's in their estate. Then they would have to have separately a separate estate set up. Having an estate set up means having a will or having a trust, right? I would recommend you have a trust, because a trust is not subject to probate, right? So if you die what's referred to intestate, meaning no will, no trust, right? Then it's subject to probate in California to identify the rightful heirs of your 50% of the state that you own as tenants in common with this other person. They
Mm,
don't automatically get it, because they only own 50%. The other 50% was owned by this other guy, John Doe, who has a father who's a real estate guy, or has sisters or brothers. And then they have to find those rightful heirs, and he gets that,
okay.
right?
So
So it's very important
you put it into,
that they set it up, because these,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
say it again.
I was going to say, so in that situation, you're saying it's smarter.
No, you went digital, so I didn't hear your question.
Sorry, can you hear me now, Pat? Oh, oh, there
I
you
can hear you now.
go. Okay, so in that situation,
I think I got you now. Yeah.
as to the ridership thing, so say that you you have, I want to know the best. So the best advice is probably to have it in a will and also have it in a separate trust, right? So have both things stipulated in the situation of someone passing away.
If you have a will, you don't, if you have a trust, you don't need to have a will.
Oh,
A trust has what's called a pour over will contained within it. Okay.
okay.
The trust is the most important thing you can set up. Once you become an owner of anything tangible, you want to set up a trust, even if it's a simple little trust you set up on LegalZoom. You want to have a trust set up, and then you need to vest all the ownership of your assets in the name of the trust. Because if you set up a trust and then you don't assign the ownership to the trust, they're not in the trust.
Ah, okay. And that
So
works for tenants in common?
say it again.
And so that's the kind of situation you would think of as far as a remedy in the rights of survivorship and a tenants in common.
No, they're two different issues, and it's a little more complex than that.
Tenancy.
The the first question you need to ask him: how do you intend to buy this property?
Mm,
Are 100% of the proceeds coming from you? Are 100% of the monthly proceeds coming from you? Or do you two have a mutual agreement stating we're going to put $100,000 down, 50 is coming from me, 50 is coming from you? We're buying the property jointly, right?
mhm.
If they're buying the property jointly, they're going to want to take the property either as tenants in common or joint tenants because of the joint ownership interest.
Okay.
Money and tenancy, right?
Hold on, Pat, I lost you again.
Meaning the amount they spend in the property possession wise. Did you go digital again?
Yeah, yeah. Can you go ahead
How
that?
about now? Yeah. So you gotta know how they're gonna buy the property. That's the most important thing. Then you're gonna know the route to go.
Okay. Okay. Um, I'm sure I could do with further explanation on that, but we'll save that for next time because we're running into our hour here. So, anything that you did a lot today with giving us, real world examples to do with the curriculum today that are happening in your life right now. So it's been really good. But is there anything else story wise that you have for us, oh master real estate storyteller? Do you have a story for us this week that can
Well,
enlighten
I
something?
well, I was able to like weave stories into the specific questions this week, which was helpful. I would just say, based upon what you and I were touching on before we started recording today about being systemized. If you're getting into this business, you need to protect your time and you need to align yourself with systems. And whatever those systems are and however those systems work for you. I know what works for me and I know what doesn't work for me. So I would just say when you get into this, I like to refer to things as games because I grew up playing games, right? And I think of everything as a game, winning and losing. And there are certain things that you do that enable you to win. And I'm just saying to you, put yourself in a situation to win every day when you're coming into this new business. Study, learn it like you're doing, and then put some key habits into play every week for you. So I would just say to you, this next week, the next 7 days, keep track of your time every day. Keep track of what you're doing in your alignment, and look at how much time and look at how much effort that you're putting into this process because it's an important process. It will pay off. It may not pay off in a week or a month, but it's going to pay off eventually. And when it does, you'll be able to look at it and go, you know what, I implemented certain things, and I think I'm going to eliminate 5 of them, and I'm going to keep these other 5 because they work for me. So I just encourage you this next week to keep track of things and use it as a test.
No, I love that. You're right. And that's something I've been kind of a little bit struggling with lately because um, it's just life has been kind of a little bit all over the place lately, and it's not what I've been used to. My life used to be pretty systematic because of how work was going for me at the time. But with things being the way that they are with this epidemic going on, it's been a weird shift to have so much more free time, and so I'm kind of not always at, you know, it's kind of what you and I were talking about before we started this, is that, if you a system is valuable, right? It's really valuable to be in a system and have something be systematic and working over time that way. Um, I but when all of a sudden you're all of a sudden like thrusted into like, okay, wait a second, all of that has been totally like demolished and we're in upheaval. Now how will you restructure your life to kind of fit around this whole thing? I was like, I've been now realizing through our conversation, that's something I've been struggling with to find a new balance, because when I first started all of this studying for these books, I had a very good system going on. But after a while, it got to be like, I need to pull back a little bit. I'm putting too much pressure on myself to this. I don't feel like I'm enjoying studying, and I like studying. I like learning new stuff. So I have to now kind of calculate my systems right now. But I'm glad we talked about it because I see the outcome and the effects in your life, and I see that as a positive. So I appreciate that that perspective of yours to to help me along with this.
Yeah, awesome. I'm really happy to be a part of the process.
Yeah, well, thank you, Pat. Anyways, that brings us to our hour. Everybody, thank you for watching and hanging out with us today. A lot of good stuff here today. So please like and subscribe. And we will see you next week. All right, Pat, you have a fantastic week. God bless you, sir.
Thank you, sir. I'll see you soon.
All right.